I think something's following me, and I don't know what to do. When I, a 19-year-old female, was 14, I was sent to a boarding school a couple of hours away from my house. I actually really enjoyed it, and I thought living in a house full of my best friends was the best thing ever. I spent about 3 years there. When I was 15 in year 10, I stayed in one of 4 dorms in the house, being D dorm. Now, there was a rumour that D dorm was haunted because of lights that would flicker and things of the sort, but nothing ever remotely extreme, and frankly, I still didn't believe in any sort of paranormal activity, so the rumours went completely over my head, my friends alike. One day though, I overheard a group of my friends doing something in the room next to me. Shh. Write it down, don't move it. The walls between rooms didn't reach the ceiling, and so you could hear everything throughout the dorm most of the time. I went to investigate what my friends were doing, and found that one of my best friends, Brittany, had brought a Ouija board along with her, and was playing it with a group of her friends. I was somewhat fascinated since I'd heard about it when I was really young, but never actually had the opportunity arise to see one in action. So there I am, watching and bantering with my friends as they played it, along with my friend Jess, who was spelling out on the notes of her phone each thing the board was saying. The girls were asking it things like their birthdays, just things like that. At one point, the girls asked me to get a student that none of us knew, so I went out and invited a student into the room. This was someone none of us had spoken to. The girls asked the board her birthday, and were pretty shocked when the board gave her a birthday, and the student confirmed it was hers. After that, everyone decided to stop playing. That is, everyone except for Brittany, who invited me to play it with her. God, I wish I never touched that thing. But I agreed, and so we continued to play with it, just Brittany and I, in the room, along with Jess, who was still writing out the letters. I was the one orchestrating the session, asking simple questions like, is anything here with us? Give us a sign if you're here, those kind of things. After receiving a yes but no spooky sign, I asked the entity what its name was, to which the planchette began to go back and forth spelling Z-O, Z-O, Z-O. Brittany and I had no idea what this meant at the time, so we weren't exactly moved by it. That is, until Jess googled it, and without telling us what came up, ordered us to stop playing at that second. We took our hands off, and forgot to say goodbye. Jess revealed her phone screen to us, and to our shock, it was a reference to the name of a supposed demon, Zozo, which gained notoriety, lurking on Ouija boards, and it even had a movie made about it. We were creeped out, but nothing too crazy. Every night for the following 3 weeks, Brittany and I both woke up every night at 3 AM feeling strange, and were both having horrific nightmares. This continued for exactly 3 weeks, and started and stopped for us both on the same days. After the nightmares stopped, I didn't pay much mind to what had happened, as demonic energetic attachments was the last thing on my mind really, and just put the strange dreams and awakenings to anything else subconsciously, I guess. For the following year, her and I both didn't experience anything out of the normal. That is, nothing I registered as strange anyway. After a year, I moved away to Europe, and this is where the activity peaked. We moved into a modern but old house. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary with the house, but pretty quickly, I began feeling strange, occasionally feeling watched pretty intensely, things moving on their own in front of me, seeing shadows in the corner of my eye, doors slamming, the attic light switching on and off when the door was locked, and hearing knocks from the attic, feeling a presence go from the room I was in into the stuffed bear next to me extremely intensely. My grandma's old wind-up music box playing on its own. Just an all-round feeling of just something being off. In general, the activity would only happen when I was alone, and I would tell my family, but they would just brush it off as it was all in my head. Other than my sister, who also told me she felt weird in the house. That is until one day where my mum called me into her room to show me one of her coat hangers swinging back and forth wildly. This opened her mind ever so slightly, but she continued to brush it off. As time went on, the activity became more and more intense. Looking back, there was actually some really freaky shit going on in that place. I recall one time I was home alone for a few weeks, where I was sitting in my bed watching TV around 2 in the morning, when I felt something sit on the end of my bed. The blanket moved, and there was an impression where this weight had come onto it. On top of this, I could feel something staring at me. One of the most unsettling things that happened to me in that house, though, was an occasion where my big sister, who is my best friend, and I were hanging out in a room where we always spent time together. When you walk into the room, directly opposite the door, leaning against the far wall, was a large, full-body mirror that we would use to look at our outfits, rarely ever getting close enough to touch, and always being able to see any marks on it, since it was the first thing you'd see when you'd enter the room. One night her and I were on the bed, when she got up to go to the bathroom. Upon re-entering the room, my sister asked me, "Did you touch the mirror?" I said no, and my sister went pale and pointed at the mirror. When I saw it, my blood ran cold. Right on the mirror was the biggest handprint I had seen in my life. This thing was roughly 35 centimeters long, and it was intact. You could really see the mark of each joint of the fingers, and it was clearly not dragged or out there early because, as I said, it's the first thing you see when you enter the room. We called for my mum to look at it, and she attempted to tell us that it was a dragged print from maybe an attempt to move the mirror, a claim we contested heavily. Another disturbing occurrence was a time where I had left an unfinished painting sitting vertically inside my room. However, the face of the girl in my painting was horizontal. When I woke up, the painting has very clear tears running down the girl's face horizontally. I also had a vision, a kind of experience once when I was drifting off to sleep, where I saw a multitude, maybe 7 or 8, very demonic or spooky looking faces staring at me while I had my eyes closed. I never experienced anything similar before or after that, but I can still see the faces if I think of them. Many unexplainable things happened over the 3 years we lived in the house, and needless to say, it was a relief and a half to have moved out, and to another country at that. For about 3 weeks after we moved of the house, the strange feelings and occurrences subsided. That is until one night when I woke up, wide awake around 5 AM with a very intense feeling of dread. I was able to get back to sleep. The following night my sister and I were sleeping in the same bed, and I had an extremely vivid dream of watching myself and my sister sleeping from the perspective of something that was in the top left corner of my room. Needless to say, I was pretty unsettled at the thought that this entity may have followed me. I don't know if it came from the board or if it came from the house, but recently it's getting worse. I was at a girlfriend's house about a month ago with her and 3 dudes when I started talking about it. Upon talking about it, all doors in the house slammed except for one, the bathroom door, which was in view for all of us, which began to open and close wildly. This scared the absolute shit out of me, and Sarah could tell, so she locked the door and we decided to stop talking about it. This is where things began to get a little crazier, but I swear to God I'm not crazy. At least, I'm pretty grounded and in touch with reality, and I really experienced this. It was the same night, and I'd gone to sleep downstairs around 1:40 AM after a night of drinking and smoking weed, so I was pretty ready to sleep, and should have had little issue with sleeping well. I woke around 3:30 AM feeling very, very uncomfortable. Sarah had actually told me the previous owner of the house had died in the room above me, which didn't help. I tried and tried to get to sleep but couldn't. Every time I was about to drift off into sleep, it was like something jerked me awake. This was until about 6 AM, when I was trying to get to sleep, when I began to hear a sound, which can be compared to the sound of rushing water or TV static in my left ear. This went on for about 3 seconds, until the sound became background sound to somewhat raspy whisper-like voice which told me to come. This experience really freaked me the fuck out, and the occurrences have been getting worse since. Rather than feeling watched only at home or when I'm alone, it's begun to happen when I'm in public, in the car, during the day and at night. I've also seen shadowy figures in my peripheral vision multiple times a day. I've also had the sensation of being touched by something when I'm alone at night, either on my phone, in bed, or trying to sleep. The feeling is kind of a static electric pins and needle feeling, but it's very clear. I felt it on my arms, my hands, my thighs, and even on my backside too. This thing will move things ever so slightly when I look at them if I'm with people, or do things like make lights go off as I look at them when I'm with people, which I've assumed is making its presence known to me. About 2 weeks ago, I had a dream where I was getting into the car and saw the same handprint from my mirror only a lot bigger, on the seat. It grabbed me by my throat and I woke up. I guess I should mention I've had somewhat bad luck after moving into the original house too, with my very tight-knit family completely falling apart, being sexually assaulted on 2 occasions, and the death of a friend. I don't know if these have anything to do with it, but I guess it's worth mentioning. I know I might sound crazy, but I really just don't know what to do at this point. It's freaking me out and I want whatever the fuck this thing is to stay away from me, for good. And I don't know where to turn to help. I'm not religious, but tomorrow I plan on going to a church to speak to anyone I can about it. If you've read this far, thank you. And thank you to anyone that can give me any kind of advice on what to do. I really appreciate it. Today's shout out goes out to Miranda, Carol, Luca the Potato, Bullet Heads. Thank you for the support.